Your other question was?
On Iran, that they said they're not going to negotiate under pressure. So is this a time limit?
Yes. Iran's behavior across the globe threatens U.S. national interests, which is why President Trump reimposed the maximum pressure campaign designed to end Iran's nuclear threat, curtail its ballistic missile program, and stop it from supporting terrorist groups. As the president has said, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. He has also been very clear that the United States can't allow that to occur. The president expressed his willingness to discuss a deal with Iran, as we know. If the Iranian regime does not want a deal, the president is clear he will pursue other options, which will be very bad for Iran. All right. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
On Gaza, the UN's Humanitarian Affairs Office has said that 15 paramedics, civil defense, and a UN worker were killed, in their words, one by one by the IDF. They have dug bodies up, they said, in a shallow grave that have been gathered up, and also vehicles in the sand. Have you got any assessment of what might have happened, and given the potential use of American weapons, is there any assessment of whether or not this complied with international law?
Well, I can tell you that for too long, Hamas has abused civilian infrastructure, cynically using it to shield themselves. Hamas's actions have caused humanitarians to be caught in the crossfire. The use of civilians or civilian objects to shield or impede military operations is itself a violation of international humanitarian law. And of course, we expect all parties on the ground to comply with international humanitarian law.
But this is specifically a question on it's a question about accounting and accountability, given that it may have been the use of US weapons. So it's a question about the State Department rather than Hamas. Is there any action to assess?
Every single thing that is happening in Gaza is happening because of Hamas. Every single dynamic. I'll say again, I've said it, I think, in every briefing. All of this could stop in a moment if Hamas returned all the hostages and the hostage bodies they are still holding and put down its weapons. There is one entity that could stop it for everyone in a moment, and that is Hamas. All loss of life is regrettable. It's key, obviously. Whoever it is, wherever they live. And this has been the nature of what fuels Secretary Rubio and President Trump in their willingness to expend this kind of capital early on in this term to make a difference and to change the situation. So I think that is the one thing that remains clear in all of this, which is all for all of us, which is why we work to stop it.
I know that's
a horrible dynamic. Yes, Humaira.
A few weeks after President Trump's Shalom Hamas tweet or social media post, Israeli authorities giving indication that they're preparing for a potential larger scale military operation in Rafah, potential reoccupation of Gaza. I wanted to get some insight as to whether there is coordination between the U.S. and Israel on that front, whether the State Department takes a position on Israel's potential plans. The second question was, Israeli officials have been sounding the alarm about Egypt's military operations in Sinai, saying that it's a potential violation of the peace treaty between the two countries. Any position from the State Department in regards to Egypt's activities and whether they deem it a violation of the peace treaty?
Well, we never speak about ongoing diplomatic relationships, but we do have the pillars of our approach that remain resolute. We stand with Israel and we stand for peace. President Trump has made clear the consequences of what will happen if Hamas continues to hold hostages. I will leave it at that, but of course add in the fact that Secretary Rubio has been as aggressive in his rhetoric that Hamas cannot continue to exist, and again, that we stand with Israel and their efforts to defend themselves. Yes, ma'am. Here,
Thank you. Tom Watkins at The National. Two questions. On the subject of student deportations, several pro-Israel activist groups are providing US authorities with the names of people involved in last year's pro-Palestinian protests. Among those names are naturalized Americans, people originally from the Middle East but who are now US citizens. Can you tell me, is the US weighing any action against American citizens who spoke out during last year's protests?
Well, I would have to speculate on that. I'm not going to discuss the nature of the diplomatic or strategic conversations that any department in the government's having, let alone the State Department. What I can tell you is, as just repeating what Secretary Rubio has said, is that if you come into this country, if you've lied to get in this country, and you've come into this country and have committed crimes, or have clearly, if you've done something, whereas if you told us you were going to do it when you were applying for that visa, you would never have gotten that visa. And we're going to be very aggressive in the nature of acting on that. He's made that very clear. But I won't discuss the nature of decision-making in that framework or speculate on the nature of what the department will be
Even someone
doing.
who's become a naturalized U.S. citizen could still be.
Don't draw conclusions, because I'm not answering your question.
Okay.
That's a big mistake. I'm not answering the specifics of your question. Don't draw that conclusion. Don't put words in my mouth. That's not what I said. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Today. Yes, Nick.
Thank you. Back to Iran. Iran's president yesterday ruled out direct negotiations with the United States on its nuclear program. Was that what the United States was seeking, direct negotiations, or would the United States be open to third-party intermediaries?
We know, of course, that the Iranian regime has always been hostile to the United States and our allies and partners, and they are one of the leading state sponsors of terror, as we know. It supports Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, the Taliban, al-Qaeda, and other terrorist networks. Iran's own Islamic Revolutionary Guards is a designated foreign terrorist organization, and many regime leaders have also been designated as terrorists. I can tell you that in negotiating, which I've already answered to some degree, is that the president's made it clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And what we want from them, as Secretary Rubio has said, under Donald Trump, there is not going to be a nuclear Iran. Iran must stop its nuclear escalations, its ballistic missile program, its networks and campaign of regional aggressive activities, its repression of the Iranian people's freedom, and the IRGC's destabilizing activities. I also think I can say this to you, that President Trump has been consistent and clear. The United States is determined to make sure that Iran will not acquire a nuclear weapon. He has expressed his willingness to pursue a deal with Iran. If the Iranian regime does not want a deal, as I said earlier, the president has other options, and those alternatives will be very bad for Iran.